everyone, welcome to the first edition of the official flat season of the SBK betting podcast, because we are heavily transfixed on the flat. We are back. It's the first classics of the season, much to the light of Tom Collins, I'm sure, and Ross Millar, because absolutely getting full force into the flat now. Very much enjoying the juvenile series that Ross is beginning, and TC, I know, has been waiting for this for the last 4 months anyway. We do have still got the small matter of the final day of Punchesstown on Saturday, which we'll get to, so we've got a bit of jumps, but it is focusing on the flat this weekend. But before we get into it, again, the podcast had a good way to end out the jump season in the UK. Myself and Ross, John Bomb, what a delight that was to see, 15-8. Ross also gave Manela Kakuna a really strong, positive viewpoint around Manela Kakuna. Wasn't he good and gutsy at 9-1? And that was a fantastic way to basically crown Willie Mullins the British champion trainer. So all that aside now, we're going to focus, as I mentioned, on this weekend at hand. It is the first of the classics. We've got the 2,000 guineas, the 1,000 guineas, and we're recording Thursday morning. Just had declarations in for Saturday. Still waiting on decks for Sunday for the guineas itself, but I'm pretty certain we have quite a good idea on what the guineas will look like for the fillies. So I'll start with UTC. I suppose we have been eagerly anticipating this first classic for a long time. I think you and I both had a good eye on City of Troy after that maiden success. I think you hold quite a juicy looking betting slip for this weekend, so it would be fair to say you've been waiting for this. What are you expecting on Saturday?
Yeah, I believe City of Troy is the best 2-year-old I've ever seen. It's a big statement, I know. Johannesburg is the top of the actual list if you look on figures. He was a very good 2-year-old, but had lots of races, so was able to prove himself. And obviously Frankel was a fantastic 2-year-old as well, but he really became the horse that we remember fondly in his 3-year-old season. I think City of Troy was the best 2-year-old I've ever seen. He was so good and superlative. That race alone was just mind-bogglingly good. So I hope he wins easily. I think he'll win easily. It's not the best 2,000 guineas I've ever seen. You know, Rosallion's obviously highly regarded by Richard Hannon, who's done well in the race before. The rest are much of a muchness. So it would be disappointing if he was to lose this race. Unfortunately, I don't have a slip this week. I only backed him for the Derby last year, which is kind of stupid. I wish I backed him for the Guineas as well. I got 14 or 16-1 for the Derby after the superlative. So hopefully he wins the Guineas, because otherwise I could technically be tearing that slip up. I won't be betting in the race just because he is a short price. Saying that, I do think 4-6, 8-13 is fair on what he achieved as a 2-year-old. You know, this is a horse who Aidan O'Brien quite clearly loves. He thinks it's going to be superb. They haven't put any other horses in the race, which shows their belief in him. And also, I think he's only going to improve for this step up in trip and even further in time, obviously, as I backed him for the Derby. I hope he wins very impressively, and we're talking about this next big star on the flat racing scene.
Okay, yeah, look, this is a horse that seems to be pretty unflappable, the way that they can ride him as well. He's got so much natural speed, but he's also clearly got the stamina that's abundant in his pedigree. And Aidan O'Brien has made the quite unusual decision to have him as his sole representative in the race. TC, what do you take on that before I get to Ross and pedigree and those kind of angles? Do you see that as a confidence boost? Do you see that, you know, this is the kind of horse can do anything? Because normally they have at least some sort of pace setter, but they clearly don't think that's needed this time around.
No, I think he's got so much tactical speed that he can find himself in a nice spot, even if they go slow, which they won't do because it's a Guineas, or if they go quick. He's very versatile in that regards, from what we've seen so far. Obviously, he hasn't had a massive runs, but in the 3 starts he's had, he's shown lots of different abilities and characteristics, which kind of leans himself to being the sole representative here. You know, Aidan does like to put a pace setter in there, or 1 or 2 others that have a chance of winning. But we've seen when he has a very good horse like this, sometimes he just relies on them in races. He probably thinks he's well capable of winning. And I would say it's a huge positive that he's the only one in the race. But when we move on to the 1,000 guineas, he's doing the same with Ylang Ylang, and I'm not sure about that there. So I can't necessarily contradict myself in this regard. What I will say is, if City of Troy is Aidan O'Brien's only hope in the race, he's my only hope in the race as well.
He's only won this race once before with 1 horse in the race, and that was King of Kings in 1998, was his first ever Guineas. And, you know, the confidence of youth and probably inexperience did him very well then. But look, I think now it's the confidence with experience that is probably playing his hand here. And you've got to think, from what we've heard from Ryan Moore, from what I've heard in an interview, this is the most excited he's ever been on a 2000 Guineas prospect, which says a lot for a multiple 2000 Guineas winning jockey. So a lot of confidence from TC. It's not essentially a betting race if you're a real City of Troy fan. But look, we shouldn't forget about the rest of them. We've got a Group 1 winner in Rosallion. We've got unbeaten horses, the likes of QIPCO Ghost Writer, Notable Speech, who's been very impressive since coming out this year. And I suppose it's deep in the fact that the trainers of those up against City of Troy are very happy to take him on and believe that their horses are up to it. Ali and Abby only needs to find a length and a bit, or a couple of lengths on City of Troy based on the form last year. Who's improved? Who hasn't? I think that's what we love about horses at this time of the year, Ross, because you're seeing 2-year-olds turning into, nearly they're teenagers at this stage. And it's going to be fascinating as to who has done that developing, done that growing. Has City of Troy matured? Does he even need to? And it's a bit like the Pinatubu time. Do you remember a couple of years ago where we thought he was going to be the next best? And he just wasn't really the same horse because he hadn't really developed like the others. So there's a lot to take in, I suppose, on Saturday. What are you most looking forward to seeing?
You've got to go on the confidence that Aidan O'Brien is running just one horse. And he didn't look a big horse in the City of Troy last year, but then Willie Mullins mentioned this week, and it was really interesting, parallel, Aidan O'Brien and Willie Mullins virtually saying the exact same paragraph, word for word, that if a horse, when you stand into it, is actually a big horse and it surprises you, that's a really good sign because they're well proportioned and they tend to be balanced. It was uncanny, actually, how similar their statement was. He looks to me, didn't look a big horse, but he was undoubtedly athletic. He was brilliant in the Superlative Stakes. That form, for a while, didn't work out. Then Hartum obviously came out and won the Vintage Stakes. He's won the Craven as well. Quite what that Craven was worth, I don't know. But sometimes you have to go on your eye, don't you? And visually, he was very impressive. He's too short for me to be interested in, but I would agree with TC that you could argue there's value. TC put a good post up on X this week, actually, that value isn't always a big price. Value is a horse being a bigger price in its percentage chance of winning. And I would agree with TC that probably his current odds reflect that. He might well get very well backed now, though, between now and Saturday. Rosallion is impressive, but he's impressive in terms of how much they're talking about him. Richard Hannon is very bullish about the work he's doing. He's the best 3-year-old he's ever had, or best 2-year-old coming into 3-year-old he's ever had, but that still might not be good enough. I think the ground got him beaten the Champagne Stakes at Doncaster when he was behind Iberian. He looked very good in the Jean-Luc Lagardère, quickened up impressively from a fairly uncompromising position, having pulled quite hard. If the ground stays as it is, he's got a chance. And I could understand people chancing him and backing him each way, but backing him each way as a shot to nothing is not my angle. The one I would perhaps play if I was given a bet each way shot is Task Force. I thought he was really impressive behind Van Dijk in the middle park, finished very, very strongly. And Van Dijk is no mug over 6 furlongs. I think he's a very smart horse indeed. And you would think on pedigree Task Force is going to stay. It's by Frankel, out of special duty, who won 2,000 Guineas. She won the English and the French 1,000 Guineas without passing the post first. She was beaten both times and got awarded the race. But the stamina is clearly there. It's a bit of a mixed family. She's been bred to some very different stallions. There's speed in there and stamina in there. But Elegant Verse, who's by Galileo, who's a similar stout pedigree, stayed 1.25 miles, stayed 1.5 miles. So I have no issue that Task Force will stay this trip. Ralph Beckett has just been a little bit quiet coming to Hanno. That would be a slight concern. But then just the final thing I'd leave you with, if you're looking to oppose City of Troy, all 10 of Aidan's winners have gone straight to the Guineas. They've not had a prep race. So he's following that path. That is a very big positive. There's a little rumour, and I say rumour, and I think it's unjustified, that Justifies aren't training on. He's 0 from 14 in the UK and Ireland so far this year, including a few short price ones turned over. But I would caveat that by saying most of those are with Aidan, and I think a few of his have been a bit slow to come to hand. I wouldn't put any weight on it, but you can guarantee if he gets beat, that little rumour is going to very quickly turn into social media fact.
I think people want to find something that they can hang on and say, I told you so, if it was to happen. And look, we were here this time last year with Auguste Rodin, who I think all of us were keen on. And then, you know, what happened was a complete, utter disaster. I think if this horse doesn't look like he's got a quirk like Auguste Rodin clearly has, but I think if it was anything, it might be this sort of theory that just in his pedigree, it doesn't show the longevity like confirmed yet as some of the others that are just proven, you know, the Frankels, and even, you know, looking at like the likes of the two darn hot in here, a Blue Point in here. Blue Points are proving themselves at 3, but not further enough for us to be completely confident that we know where they can be at the end of their 3-year-old career. So look, it's small.
Sorry, just to jump in as well, and about Justify, I understand exactly what Ross is saying. He's reading stats. I mean, how can you oppose that? However, in the US, Justify's obviously got a big group of progeny. This week in the Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby, which we'll briefly mention later, he's got several runners. In the Oaks, he's got Just FYI. In the Derby, he's got Just a Touch and Just Steel. There are other horses this year from Justify's progeny that have gone on to win, the likes of Champagne One. So his 3-year-olds in the US are actually doing okay, despite the fact they're not doing overly well in the UK.
Yeah, and it's really good insight. That's why we have TC, our resident American expert, and we will be coming to the Kentucky Derby. Small matter of a fabulous day at Churchill on Saturday to contend with. More of that. But look, we've had a real, you know, good think about this race, and I think we all agree that it's City of Troy's race to lose, and potentially, as Ross has said, just task force based as a sort of a going forward type of horse. He might be the one. Interesting to see that he's had wind surgery over the winter as well. For what it's worth, Ali and Abbey is a horse that I really liked when he won first time at Salisbury. Owen Burrows, I actually interviewed that day, and he said he's only going to get better as he gets older. He's a big type. He got within, and I never should have underestimated how far City of Troy beat him. 3.5 lengths of City of Troy. Ali and Arby has every chance of improving as much as City of Troy has. He's got by a family that improved in time. And I just think at an each way price around 16-1, I wouldn't. That would be my type of bet in the race, as opposed to getting too involved with it from a win perspective with City of Troy. Okay, so that's the 2,000 guineas. As I said, we've got the declarations in. We've got the 1,000 guineas as well on Sunday, where it's more of an open feel. I feel like we have not been. I don't know why she's not getting the credit that she really probably deserves, and I think Carl Burke has banged the drum that this is the horse everyone has to beat, Fallen Angels. She's got the Group 1 winning form in the book. She's been kept for this. She's, again, by last year's leading first season sire, Too Darn Hot, out of Agnes Stewart. Pedigree-wise, Ross, we'll come to you quickly. What would your takings be on her and her potential, potentially compared to some of the others? Because I think it probably matters a little bit more with fillies, and especially their size, how much they've grown, and it being so early in the season as well, considering how miserable this year's been. They've really got to be as to their optimum now, which can be quite difficult considering this is what we considered the sort of last 2-year-old race, really, of the year.
Yeah, I think the weather is definitely going to impact on the fillies more than the colts. I think if you look back from September, I would be more surprised if the 2,000 guineas form didn't uphold than if the 1,000 guineas form had got turned on its head further through the season. Too Darn Hot, from what I remember, he didn't do a huge amount of development from 2 to 3. He was a nice model. He didn't sort of go on. That might be the one angle you could oppose Fallen Angel with. But in terms of pedigree, Agnes Stewart won the Mayhill over a mile. I think there's not a doubt on pedigree that she'll stay. And then when you watch her performance in the Moy Glare, she quickened up smartly. She pulled away. I thought she was going further away again at the line. I don't think there's a doubt in my mind that she'll stay. I hope she'll have Henry Longfellow is a slip in the bin from the Juvenile Watch readers for the 2,000 guineas, but we have got Fallen Angel at 33, so I'm hoping she's trained on and she stays well. And I do think, as you said, the wet spring has caused plenty of problems. There's plenty of trainers that are clearly, don't use the word struggling, but they're clearly having to be patient to get these horses to come to hand, and you cannot force them. They'll come when they're ready. Carl Burke clearly, obviously lives in warmer climates or something, I don't quite know, but he's 27% so far this season. I wouldn't go a whole lot on trainer stats a lot of the time, but I do think that's relevant at this time of the year with horses that are perhaps having their first couple of runs. So I do think she's the one they've got to beat. Ylang Ylang, I think I'm going to be with TC. I'm not quite sure what he's going to say, but he sounded like he was a bit negative on her. I'm just not sure she's got the speed for this unless it buckets down between now and Sunday. I thought in the Fillies Mile, she won it through stamina. I had to revise my opinion of her. I thought she was a sort of second-tier filly for Coolmouth for much of last year. She was very well talked up and flattered to deceive on a number of occasions, but she was impressive in the Fillies Mile, but it was soft ground. It was the end of the season, and I think she just outstayed them. Ramatuelle from France, I think, is interesting because she's had a prep race. It was a narrow second, but that was on heavy ground. Her two best bits of form were on better ground, including winning the Robert Papin, and she beat His Majesty there. Now, form of fillies beating colts, I think you need to upgrade. I think that was a decent performance, and His Majesty, although not top class, is certainly a very good colt. So she'll appreciate this ground, and I think she'll be fitness advantage. If I was going to add one to my slip, and I probably will just sit on my hands and stick with Fallen Angel, I do think Porta Fortuna is interesting. Won the Cheveley Park over 6 furlongs, stayed very strongly. Got a little bit far back, I felt, in the Moy-Glare when she was beaten by Fallen Angel, and then went obviously over to the US and ran over the mile there around a bend, which of course changed things and the pace of the race. TC might tell me more, but it's not quite a mile, is it, basically? But she stayed it very well. She's got loads of speed. If she's got a chance of staying a mile, it's on ground that's quick and drying. And at 20-1, I thought for a filly of her class, and she has got class, was just a bit too big. So I might have a bit each on her as well.
Yeah, I like that angle of Porta Fortuna. She's got a lot of experience. It was Cachet, was it not, who went over to America for the Breeders' Cup, ran a blinder, and then obviously came forward and bossed to win the 1,000 guineas a couple of years ago. Porta Fortuna, also a Royal Ascot winning filly. She's rock solid, isn't she? It's a nice price. That's what I like about this race. And actually, to be fair to 1,000 guineas, it's the better of the classics this time last year that actually turned out to be of note going forward form-wise when Morge won it. But I think, to this point about Ylang Ylang, it's not surprising really. Aidan O'Brien, he seems to run his fillies a lot more as 2-year-olds than he is doing his colts, and he's happy to do it. I don't know his experience, don't know what he's trying to learn from them, but it's been a pattern, hasn't it? So I think because we've seen her limitations, or she's been exposed, especially at the Curragh when she was really disappointing in the Moy-Glare. So you kind of feel like you know what you've got with her, but again, you can't really knock what Aidan O'Brien might find in terms of improvement over the winter. It's a real puzzle. I'm enjoying this one to try and solve, TC. Obviously, Justify again with Ramatuelle could be a wonderful weekend for him, both in the States and over here. Where did you begin, and where did you end up?
Well, I share a lot of the same opinions as Ross, so stop me if I'm sounding a bit like a parrot in the room. But I began obviously with the favourites, Fallen Angel, Ylang Ylang. I'm making more of a meal of Ylang Ylang than Johnny Deneen did on Up the Ante. I'm having an absolute nightmare with that name. You have to start with those two because they're at the top of the market for leading connections with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds with good form next to their name. Fallen Angel, I'm sure, is going to love the distance. Probably the horse to beat in this race, but just the price is a little too short for me in what is a wide open 1,000 guineas. Ylang Ylang will definitely want further. Completely agree with Ross there. May lack the speed to win this. Could be staying on late for third or second. And then you've got to look further down the list. And you come to the likes of Dance Sequence, who was a big eye catcher when second last time. Ramatuelle as well, finishing second. The fact they've both been beaten this year is a slight negative for me. Like, we're talking about the cream of the crop, the cream of the 3-year-old crop. And they've already tasted defeat. Now, that's not to say they're not going to improve, and they definitely could win this race, but at the prices, I don't want any part of them. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if they did win. What is interesting, and I'm going to talk about trends here, and trends only tell you what's happened in the history of the race. They don't tell you what's going to happen in the future before someone writes it in the comments. But favourites haven't got a very good record in the 1,000 Guineas, and actually only one jolly has crossed the line in front since 2008. Now, when I say cross the line, it's because there's actually been two winning favourites since then. Of course, Special Duty, the 9-2 favourite back in 2010, was awarded the race once. Jacqueline Quest, who was 66-1, was disqualified. But generally, favourites don't have a good record. And given this is so wide open, I wanted one at a bit of a price. And Porta Fortuna was the horse I was going to side with. But then I realised and remembered I backed Porta Fortuna in the Breeders' Cup. I'm still not over it. I thought she should have won the race. And to be honest, I didn't think she stayed the mile as well as I wanted her to. There's every chance she's going to get it this year, but there's just that nagging doubt in my mind. And I'm not the most loyal of punters, I'm sure you both know. So I had to look elsewhere. And I just came down and see the fire for Andrew Balding and Oisin Murphy. She's got an excellent pedigree. And yes, she was beaten by Ylang Ylang in the Fillies Mile. But I thought Oisin went a little bit too soon in that race. She showed very good acceleration coming down the hill. And she just got picked up late. She couldn't sustain her effort. If Oisin just held on to her for a little bit longer, she may have pushed the Aidan O'Brien trainee. And I'm thinking with a more patient ride this time, for a trainer who's doing very well with his horses first time up this year, See the Fire could be a player around 10-1.
Yeah, another beautifully bred filly in this race. See the Stars out of Arabian Queen, and I think Arabian Queen she's produced a lot, but I think this probably could be one of the best, and she looks like a good model. Really interested to see what they'll be like, as we've touched on in the preliminaries. Who will sort of stand out, because the one that does to me will be the one that I'll be following in. It'll be a kind of a watching brief on the day of. Really, I'm just fascinated by the French filly Ramatuelle. I think she's achieved a lot. It will be she's clearly, I think she would have needed that run at Deauville. Any rain around will help her, which is kind of surprising considering she's by Justified, but she's just seemed to be really she's handled the sort of the softer ground that's been over in France, although she has won on good ground. She just looks like she's got a lot of tactical speed. I hope she'll handle Newmarket. I followed her, and I just think, again, at around 8-9-1, she's just not a bad option here. Very open indeed, essentially, the 1,000 Guineas, and very much looking forward to it. The classics this weekend. So thanks to TC and to Ross. We're going to head back to Ross now for the SBK Gold Trophy, because, as said, final day of the Punchestown Festival, which has been, I've kind of thought I've kind of come to the end now. But the Punchestown Festival feels to me as it's been a really great festival so far. It's been one for the good guys, really. We've seen the likes of Jimmy Mangan, Martin Brazel winning the Grade 1s. This is a big handicap hurdle. It's a listed race. Obviously, SBK have done a Trojan work of sponsoring some really decent races over in Ireland, and this one hopefully will be of good quality from a betting perspective. Normally has been, and these races at Punchestown this week, Ross, have been pretty open. It's been interesting to see those horses who just improved, maybe for a little bit of better ground, haven't had tough tasks in other festivals, and have come forward. So. Interested to know your preview of this SBK Gold Trophy.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to whoever picked this one out to sponsor from the SBK team. So they've landed on a really competitive handicap hurdle. You mentioned that, lots of horses, Punchestown, have turned their form for the season on its head by racing on better ground. Some horses perhaps had busy seasons and not showing their form, and yet other horses that they had really busy seasons and still being able to go again. I mean, Mystical Power, Cheltenham, Aintree, then back to Punchestown to find as much he did at the back end of that was incredible. We haven't got full decks for this at time of recording, but I am doing a written piece which you can find on betting.getsbk.com, which will obviously have all the decks out and perhaps a little bit more in detail. But at first look, there's a few that I thought were interesting. I thought Incanto Bruno for Gavin Cromwell is of real interest. He's a very up and down horse. His form tells you that on soft ground he isn't very good, and on better ground he is really quite potentially very smart. He won his maiden hurdle at Bellewstown. The second is now rated 120. He won that by 13 lengths. Could have been 113 lengths. He didn't come off the bridle. Prior to that, he had very good bumper form at Cheltenham on good ground. Beat Strong Leader. Now, obviously, Strong Leader is a stayer, but he's a classy enough horse, Strong Leader, and Encanto Bruno coped with him comfortably enough. Gavin Cromwell's in great form, so he's got to be on a short list. Gigaro, I get the impression that he's not showing them in handicaps what they thought he might. Off a mark of 137, he was disappointing in the Coral Cup. Jockey reported that he never travelled. But if you look at his second in the Moscow Flyer, behind Mystical Power, it would suggest this mark of 137 is more than workable if he can sort of bounce back to form on a bit of better ground. That might suit him better. Monbeg Park, I thought was interesting. He was 137 over hurdles last year. He's now down to 135. By virtue of run quite poorly over fences, he just hasn't really taken to fences. Bit disappointing. He's one of those horses that I always flag up. Everyone that watched this horse last year said, oh, he'd be much better horse over fences because he's big. Sadly, he just doesn't jump well enough, so he's not a better horse over fences. Reverts back to hurdles here on better ground. Mark 135 might suit him. Of course, you've got to mention Waterford Whispers, Henry de Bromhead. If you read a Cheltenham review and it didn't mention Waterford Whispers as an eye catcher and a potential handicap job going forward, then you didn't read a Cheltenham review. He was in every review, quite rightly so. He was very good in the Martin Pipe, perhaps a little bit keen, perhaps made a bit too much use of him. He's up £2 though now to a mark of 135, might make things a little bit tougher. Castle des Mottes, my sort of cliff horse of the second part of the season, is interesting. I tipped him up for entry on the proviso that he might get better ground, and he didn't. But he's now down another £2 to a mark of 130. That's after finishing behind Katira on heavy ground. Again, a little bit too keen, but I thought he was better in the Hood. He was disappointing in the Martin Pipe, and before that he was disappointing in the Betfair Hurdle. But he is undoubtedly a talented horse, and he's getting down to an attractive handicap mark now, and if bouncing out on some better ground suits him, he's got to be on the shortlist. And then the final one would be Olympic Man, again for Willie Mullins. Absolutely bolted up in his maiden hurdle at Naas over 2 miles 3 on heavy ground. Went off a short price favourite in a listed handicap next time, over 3 miles, and tanked through the race. Did way too much. Still looked like he'd win it halfway up the running and just curled up in the last half furlong and got collared on the line. Dropping back to this trip would really suit him. So those are my shortlist, but I'll narrow it down further in the article that will be up tomorrow.
Okay, so for a busy weekend all over this country, Ireland, all over the world, Ross, what have you finalised from a Napa Next Best situation?
So I had 2 from Punchestown, Jess, because I was just determined to stick it to TC and find some jumps. But then I don't know if they're declared or not. So what I'm going to say is, these are my Napa Next Best. If one or both isn't declared, keep an eye out on the SBK socials, and I'll have done a bit more digging and I'll have found something, maybe on the flat, just to please TC. So my Nap is in the 305, and it's Spanish Harlem. Ran a really big race in the Scottish Grand National at Aintree. I would ordinarily be a bit concerned about coming back so quickly, but then Manila Kakuna last week just showed that Willie Mullins can bring these staying horses back off a very short turnaround. I thought Spanish Harlem was the eye catcher. He jumped far better than he jumped previously. He was settled quite a long way back and quite wide, and I think as it transpired, in that race, you were better off if you were situated a little bit further forward, if not making the running. His best hurdle run came on better ground. 3 chase starts in Ireland this year. He's not been afforded that. I thought it was a step forward on slightly better ground at Ayr. If he's better again for this better ground, I think he's really interesting. And he's pretty unexposed. All of his chase starts in Ireland prior to the Scottish National over 2 mile 4. He clearly stayed the trip well. Whether part of the holding him up was just to see whether he would stay or not, I'm not sure, but I'd expect a bit more of a positive ride. The 14-day turnaround, as I said, is a bit of a concern, but Willie did it with a shorter turnaround with Manila Kakuna, so I have no issues there. And then my next best is in the juvenile, and it's Storm Heart. He was sandwiched between Cargis and Majborough, who went on to win the Triumph Hurdle in the Spring Juvenile at Dublin Racing Festival. I thought it was interesting that Paul Townend stuck with him going into the Triumph. It would have been very easy for him to jump onto Cargis. It tells me that this horse is showing plenty at home. Interestingly, of all these runners that I looked through, he's the only one that had flat form on a quick surface. He actually won at my local track, Mont de Marsan, over mile 4 maiden on quick ground. Everything else has got flat form, but on typical soft French ground. He's clearly got a bit of speed. I like that, unlike Bunting and Cargis, he's coming here fresh. He went to Cheltenham. He missed entry. They've taken an entry as well. They're only 4-year-olds. And I just think he might cause a little bit of an upset in that.
Okay, Ross, we love it, but we're going to task you with a flat nap next best this time next week. But we'll let you off this time.
That sounds fair enough.
Thanks to Ross. Okay, TC, look, this is when you come alive this weekend, really. The Churchill Downs, the Kentucky Derby Day is mouth-watering from an American racing fan perspective, but just like a global racing fan perspective. Obviously, Charlie Appleby's got this kind of satellite yard. So there's horses like Mischief Magic, Legend of Time, Naval Power. They're all running on Saturday, but that's all complementing the Kentucky Derby. And I know this is the race that probably takes as much precedence in your life as the Guineas. So we're going to ask you for a next best, but a Kentucky Derby selection too, if you will.
Sure, yeah, we'll start with a Kentucky Derby. For what it's worth on the undercard, I think Mischief Magic is the best of Charlie Appleby's runners. There's a little bit of information for you if you want to bet on the undercard at Churchill on Saturday. Back to the feature, race 12 Saturday, late in the day. I think it's 11:57 p.m. UK time. Excellent race in store this year. Maximum field of 20 runners as per every single season. Encino's been taken out, so we've got a reserve in there in Epic Ride, but it's still a very good race and a wide open betting market. The traders have it down as 2 horses that are going to dominate at this stage. Sierra Leone, who won the Risen Star and the Bluegrass, and Fierceness, the champion 2-year-old, who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year and the Florida Derby this year. Now, the negatives for both of them, Sierra Leone is drawn in stall 2. Hasn't been a winner from stall 2 in the Kentucky Derby since 1978. Plus, he's a deep closer. He's going to need a lot of luck in running. Fierceness, drawn in stall 17. Now, technically, he's now in 16 because of the scratchings, but I'm using this for my trend. He's going to be wearing the number 17 saddlecloth, and no horse that has worn the number 17 saddlecloth has won the Kentucky Derby in history, 0 from 44. The only stall that has never saddled a winner of the big race. Even stall 21, which doesn't even come into play unless there's a reserve, has had a winner with Rich Strike a few years ago. So they're your negatives, but there are only history and trends and whatnot. Anything can happen. Of the 2, I do prefer Fierceness. I think he's a better horse. He's going to be closer to the speed. But they're both short prices, so I'll look elsewhere. Now, I'm going to sit on the fence because you can find all my selections on my Patreon service, but I'll give you my best pick in the race, and that is Catching Freedom for Brad Cox and Flavian Pratt. Drawn well, horse that will stay. He's got good form this season. I think he's going to handle the track better than most. Should get a nice rail riding trip and around 10-1. He's very fair price, Jess. But it's a good race. I imagine, before I get my Napa Next Best, you're going to be tuning in late on Saturday?
Absolutely. I absolutely love the Kentucky Derby, and I'm a big fan of Forever Young. Lucky enough to have seen him in Maidan, and I hope the Japanese, they deserve a winner of the Kentucky Derby. They throw so much to it, but we'll be hanging on at every eardrop and reading your column for more insight as well.
Yeah, I think Forever Young's a big player, Japan have never won the race, but they've won a few races at the Breeders' Cup recently, and Forever Young has done nothing wrong, both in the Saudi Derby and the UAE Derby. So he's got a good chance. It's just what position he'll find himself in. He's a bit of an awkward breaker, so he could be too far back. If he's prominent early, he'll be very tough to run down. But anyway, it's going to be a fantastic race. Obviously, the SBK team want me to Napa Next Best in the UK, so I'll do that. The Napa is going to be Choicia in the 205 at Goodwood on Saturday. She's 92 at the time of recording. I don't know what price she'll be at the off, but I imagine it'll be quite a lot shorter than that. This filly's developed into a really nice type in the back end of last season specifically. She won at Glorious Goodwood, which is obviously imperative given she's running at Goodwood again this weekend, and Kempton, alongside a couple of good placed efforts where she finished second in quality fields. She looked as good as ever on her comeback at Kempton last month. She was last in that race in the early stages. The race panned out and favoured the front runners, yet she made a big sweeping move and was just unlucky not to win. Got beaten by Adelaide for Joseph O'Brien. She was the best in the event. I like the fact that now she's switching back to turf. That will definitely suit her. Back to a track that she's won at before, which many horses don't handle. I think she's got so many positives in the 205 at Goodwood, and she is my nap choice here at around 9-2. The next best goes at Newmarket, and it's in the 4:45. And I know one of your horses in the race, and you've got Mr. R.L. Moore on board. I've got to stick with the form line that I love, and that is via a horse called Flying Finn. who on his first start this year finished second and has won 2 starts since in fantastic fashion. He looks at a handicapper really on the improve. Now, on his first start of the season when he was second, he was behind a horse called Eye of Dubai, who runs in the 4:45 at Newmarket on Saturday. He shaped well last year. This first time up this season when he beat Flying Finn, he won decisively on testing ground. And then last time they ran him at Newmarket, over 7 furlongs, travelled through the race so well and just got picked up late by another nice type in Brunel Nation. I say picked up, he actually won the race, but was DQ'd and placed in second because of it, a bit of interference. I love the drop back to 6 furlongs. Such a smooth travelling horse with a high cruising speed. I think that's going to suit. And if Dapper Valley doesn't come and pinch him on the line, I think Eye of Dubai's got a great chance in the 4:45.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to retaliate, aren't I? But I do hate tipping up my RN horses because I think it's never goes that well. But there was another race that Dapper was going to run in. We're going to leave him a couple of weeks, but he's come out of this race so well. He did not blow a candle out after running third at Newmarket, whenever it was, 2 and a bit weeks ago. And he's come out of it so well. Pat Dobbs said he would have won that race if he had got going on him a bit earlier. I don't think it really mattered a huge amount. He's gone up £2. He would have gone up more if he had won or got closer. As I said, Ryan Moore was a confidence from our perspective. Pat Dobbs was due to be at Goodwood. Not sure if he's going to be there anymore, but Ryan keeps the ride because he came in for it, which is very, very exciting. And look, very happy with him. Hope that he'll give us a big run on Saturday. So maybe he'll be my nap and my next best, because he's just got in on the skin of his teeth. He was going to be the first to be balloted out. And this is for Rosallion in the 550, the final race at Newmarket. This race, when I say it has been planned out for the last 33 days, from a minute past the race he won at Kempton, this was the race that they were hoping that he could get into. He is top weight. They had to make sure that they didn't go over the declaration, so he'd be balloted out. But this horse has improved massively since joining this new yard. He's a much more relaxed horse now. It'll be interesting to see him back on turf, but he's got a lot of good form on the turf. I don't think it's a hugely deep race, but I hope that Farazi Lane will keep up the good run of form for the yard. So that's my Napa next best on what I have to say must be the best racing weekend to be a racing fan, a racing punter. Enjoy it wherever you are, whatever you're watching. TC, myself, Ross will be from whatever the time, 1:10 at Newmarket to I think it's just before midnight. It's a real marathon waiting for that Kentucky Derby, but I can imagine one person lapping up every second of it, and that's Tom Collins. So make sure you keep an eye on all the columns and all the content that's coming out of SBK from our pundits, and make sure you enjoy this weekend. All new SBK users get £30 in free bets when you sign up and bet £10 for the first time. And as I said, go to SBK for lots of other offers and promotions. Enjoy this weekend, because we certainly will be. And we'll see you next week.